My name is Dan Miller, High Tech on Slack. My presentation is about a neighborhood update in Bushwick. So Bushwick is a pretty well built out wireless physical place. You heard from the last presentation, a lot of fiber running to units, fiber going to the building itself from a data center. This is kind of the other half of mesh. And this is what the early on mesh was primarily about. This is large buildings. You can see Vernon and Saratoga on the map here that you can see lots of wireless links and those blue lines going between. You can see some light blue ones that are high-speed links. You can see some dark blue ones that are the 5 gigahertz relatively slower links in comparison. And then you can see a bunch of little hubs that form themselves throughout the neighborhood for it. The red dots inside of this map, those are showing individual nodes. So those are rooftop pieces of equipment for that neighborhood there. So the updates that are mainly going on in this neighborhood, this is going back probably the last, couple of years, at least year for sure now. We have some equipment that's called LTU. It's Ubiquiti equipment, long-term Ubiquiti. I was going to say Unify, but Ubiquiti. We tested some of that stuff out. We'll get to that in a bit. 60 gigahertz expansion. So as we talked a little bit before in the prior presentation, 60 gigahertz offers a faster link, but it has some issues with rain fade. Some mid-size hub routing. So once you get some data to these hubs, how are we appropriately using that amount of bandwidth that we have from the increased bandwidth from that 60 gigahertz antenna? Some new hubs that have come online, Wilson relatively recently. That's been around for a bit. That's actually my hub, but there's been some improvements over time. And then the general community and just marketing around inside of that neighborhood. So on the right there, you can see the LTU antenna. That's an LTU LR. The Wave AP sector, so it's a 60 gigahertz sector in the middle, and then a 60 gigahertz antenna. So a sector is where you have an antenna that feeds out to multiple other antennas. So the one in the middle there, instead of just being an antenna pointed at another antenna, it's an antenna that can feed multiple antennas simultaneously. So the bottom antenna you see there, that's like a client. And then the one in the middle there, you could have a singular one of the one in the middle. You'd have multiple of the one at the bottom pointed at it simultaneous. So you would typically put that one that's in the middle on a building that has higher bandwidth, and then you would have clients that are grabbing that bandwidth from it from smaller hubs with the one at the bottom. Good question. So some issues that were presented in the Bushwick neighborhood. You can see the bottom there, overcrowding on large hubs and some 5 gigahertz frequency congestion. So you can see a speed test there, about 1 megabit per second download and about 22 upload. This was the Wilson hub. This was a hub that was serving somewhere around 10 to 12 other buildings. And it was fed from an antenna that placed on another building was getting somewhere around 200 megabits per second worth of speed. So there's a lot of 5 gigahertz congestion going on in that area. It could be from people's home Wi-Fi networks. It could be from other people that are wireless ISPs. It could be from us not doing good frequency planning. There's a variety of things that could cause that problem. So we set out to fix that because that's not good. In the bottom there, you can see the signal of the bottom middle. You can see the signal from the antenna itself. It was showing negative 59 and negative 64 on each side. That's really good numbers. That should mean 250 megabits per second. But in real life, you can see the speed test, consistently was getting about 1 megabit download. And the poor people that were sharing that were probably not very happy. You can see on Vernon, on that top bubble, all those lines going into it. So we have sector antennas again. This is now in the 5 gigahertz spectrum, not the Wave AP on that prior slide, but this is a light AP or horns that you'll see later. And those have about 120 degree fan angles or 90 degree fan angles from them. So you put like somewhere between, 3 of them if they're 120 degrees or 4 of them if they're 90 degrees. And you can do a full 360 around the building and people can connect to it. They can have somewhere between 25 and 30 clients attached to them simultaneously before they start slowing down. So we're getting to the point where these buildings, these major hubs that we have in Bushwick and Brooklyn area, Vernon and Saratoga, there's overcrowding. There's just too many people in the sectors and they're starting to suffer performance issues from it. So those are 2 main issues really going on there. So to attempt to look at those, we decided to step away from the LBE or Wave APs not Wave APs, what is it? Lightbeam. What's Airmax protocol? So Airmax protocol it's not Wi-Fi. It's a Ubiquiti specific protocol, but it uses the same frequencies. And it's how the data looks like over the airwave. And so only things that are missed it again. AirMax. Only the AirMax things can see AirMax things. So similarly, their upgrade path from that, LTU, this is what Ubiquiti has created as a newer, better product. And so we were graciously donated somewhere around 30 or 40 of these LTU LR antennas, and they were sitting in our stockroom, and we decided to put them to use. So we put a sector on Vernon, and you can see the fan angle there in the bottom left of what that looks like. So, we were able to hit a couple of our medium-sized hubs. So we got Soft Surplus Hex House, Thames, Jefferson, Wilson, and a few others inside of there. And so we put the one sector, and you can see those horns kind of on the right image there of what the sector on top of Vernon looks like. And that serviced multiple LTU LR antennas, that top middle antenna. They're on the client sites for it. And you can see the speeds that we were getting on that speed test in the top, and that was significantly better. So this is around 47 megabits download and 22 upload. Still nothing amazing, nothing close to what we want, but in that congested area, we were able to get relatively better performance from it. That said, it was not amazing performance, and it wasn't necessarily worth the effort of swapping things out to use that. It wasn't consistent. Some of the sites, Jefferson and Soft Surplus Hex House, those ones, they did pretty well. When you got over towards Wilson, it was poor again, mainly that 5 gigahertz congestion issue. Whether we use LTU or whether we use AirMax, it didn't really matter. You're in 5 gigahertz and it's suffering problems. So we need to look at something else. That said, we did see decent PTP performance, so point to point. So if you took that LTU LR antenna on the top middle and you put it on one end, and you took the LTU LR antenna and you put it on the other end, instead of one device servicing many, if you just did 1-to-1, and then we opened up the channel width from something like 20 megahertz, where the amount of bandwidth you have, all the way up to 100, and took up a big pipe of data, we were able to consistently get good 5 gigahertz performance from that. So a little more on that later, on something that unlocked a very helpful thing for us that we've needed for a while. But there is some good use for this. So we found that even though these antennas don't work very well in the 5 gigahertz congested regions where we're trying to solve these problems, they do have their use case for point-to-points, where we can use those 30 or 40 donated antennas in a good way. A lot of help from another volunteer, Matt, on this. He was kind of pushing this effort, and I was helping him out the best I could because I'm in the neighborhood. So then moving on from there, we decided we need to get out of the 5 gigahertz frequency spectrum. And the next place to move to after that is 60 gigahertz. You have antennas that are relatively inexpensive for the amount of bandwidth you can get out of them. But as mentioned before, they suffer issues like rain fade. So we're trying to solve the issues here, this 5 gigahertz congestion, the low performance we're getting because of those neighborhoods where there's lots of 5 gigahertz congestion, getting more bandwidth to these medium-sized hubs. So if we're only servicing off of the large hubs, if we're using the same technology that we use to get to people's individual rooftops, if we're serving a medium-sized hub with that then distributes that out to others, that's a bottleneck, right? And so we want to be able to get more bandwidth to them, not equal bandwidth to what everyone else has. And that way we don't have bottlenecks in our network. So medium hub bandwidth, 60 gigahertz offers significantly more performance. 5 gigahertz gives you maybe 200 megabits per second. 60 gigahertz gives you about a gigabit symmetrical. So significantly more, 5 times-ish more bandwidth you have. And also there were some problems that we saw in that area with long WDS paths. So WDS, wireless distribution system, this is where a device that we have, it's a rooftop router called an OmniTIC. And if that's on someone's house, and if it's on someone else's house that's relatively close, if your antenna, so like that LTU antenna or LDE antenna or 60 gigahertz antenna that's pointed at something, if that gets dislodged or breaks or something happens to it, those can talk to each other, the routers, and it offers a nice backup path. So your internet doesn't just go out, it just gets a little bit slower temporarily, and then we can help figure out what to do from there. So there were some long WDS paths where no one had direct antenna sites to get and point up at our major hubs. So someone would chain through someone else, that would go through someone else, that would go through someone else, and eventually they would get to poor Wilson that has 1 megabit worth of bandwidth, and then the story goes on. So we wanted to solve that too. We wanted to get a little bit more bandwidth to them so that they could share more. So we decided to test pilot this. There's a tool that Ubiquiti has that allows us to draw out what this looks like. And so you can see the plot of it here. We decided, so this Wave AP 60 gigahertz sector, we have a limited amount of azimuth, or the amount of horizontal space that it has that it can service. So we picked Jefferson, Cypress, and Wilson being the most needed because of that poor performance. But Jefferson also has a lot of clients, and Cypress relatively recently has a lot more clients too. So we put antennas on there and also a different one on Thames so that I could do a little bit of testing myself. And you can see kind of at the bottom here, not so well, but 1.6 gigabits per second retained speed from it. So really good speeds, a whole lot better than like the, 200 or so that it's mentioned on the 5 gigahertz antennas. So once that bandwidth gets to the rooftop, you need to be able to give it to things, right? It's just on the antenna now. So it needs to get distributed to other devices, people in the homes, the other antennas that distribute it out to all the other people on the medium-sized hubs. So the OmniTIC, which is that WDS style antenna router that I was talking about earlier that talks to each other, that's the tall thing that you see here on the left. And so that does a lot of things for us. It's kind of a backbone piece of equipment. Usually when someone does a rooftop install, they get an OmniTIC and then they get an antenna to point at something. And that antenna is dependent on what you're pointed at. It's a rooftop router, and so it can service multiple clients. So there could be a cable that leaves from there that goes to the first floor into someone's unit. It could go down and go to the third floor. It could go and kind of drape to the building next door potentially. It's not just a one-to-one thing. And then it can also talk wirelessly to others. It only routes about 250 megabits per second. So that's a limitation. And when you've upgraded at these medium-sized hubs from a 5 gigahertz based antenna up to a 60 gigahertz antenna, now you get a gigabit worth of speed to your rooftop on the antenna, but it's not able to go anywhere else. This router can only route 250. So I found a device that is called a WAP. That's the smaller rectangle at the bottom, and that has a newer processor in it. It does a very similar thing to what the Omni does. It costs about $60, and you can attach it to the Omni, and it routes 3 times what that can do. So it ends up being about 750 megabits per second. I tested this out. Very hard to read if you're looking at it on here, but in the bottom right corner, you can see 750, 750. And that's real life numbers that are coming in. That's my personal router at home that's going straight into my unit. So that's coming off of Vernon through a 60 gigahertz antenna, receiving on a 60 gigahertz antenna on the rooftop of Thames, and then going down into my unit, into my home router. And luckily, since all of this piece of equipment is also made by MikroTik, the same company that makes the Omni, our config generators that we have online that help program these, it's also able to configure this device. So it needs a little bit of hacky kludging right now to shut down some of the interfaces because it only has 2 Ethernet ports, not 5. So you have to go through and delete some of those things. But I was able to start from the config gen we have online, enter in a node number, and then just delete the extra interfaces off from it and the beep codes because there's no speaker on it. And it programmed totally fine. If you don't delete them, it will brick the unit and you need to fix it yourself. So this is kind of cool. And then I realized recently that our SXT, which is that square antenna that's right above it, that has the exact same processor in it. So that SXT, which we normally use to just point at other OmniTICs. So if you are on a rooftop and you can't see the large hub to point your other dish at, if you have a neighbor and they're slightly too far away for your WDSs, for the 2 routers to talk to each other, you can point that little SXT at them and basically harvest internet from your neighbor. That could also be used as a router itself too. And so any of these devices, whether it's an SXT or this WAP, both of those could get added to basically take an individual rooftop and upgrade it once you add a 60 gigahertz antenna to get 750 megabits worth of routing capacity, all for about $50 or $60 of add-on, which is good because those antennas cost about $300, $400. So it's well worth the money to be able to distribute that bandwidth. So, and it's a MIPS processor versus an ARM processor that enables that. Another cool thing about that little WAP is it also can do WDS now. So people that don't want to put an OmniTIC on their rooftop, if they have a smaller profile, if their landlord doesn't want to see this big thing, if you want to put it outside of your window on a stick or something that maybe you can't fit all that, you could then put this small little WAP outside your window and it would crosstalk to all of the other ones nearby and it would operate very similar to how our WDS works on our OmniTICs right now. So that was kind of a cool find. Getting into that specific Wilson hub a little bit more. So like I talked about before, you can see in the top left, that horrible chain that was going from this poor guy in the top left through his neighbor, through their neighbor, and then through what was Wilson. And Wilson had that 1 megabit worth of bandwidth. And then there were some other nearby people. And that whole chain, if any one person breaks down in that link, everyone would go out. So we want to fix that. So you can see some of the trials here. On that stick in the center middle is the LTU LR antenna, which we tested, found that it had about double the performance of the Lightbeam, which is our typically installed antenna, which is the top right antenna there. But double, it wasn't really enough. We were being able to carry the amount of capacity that the sub had. So in the bottom, you can see bottom right, you can see the 60 gigahertz antenna that we ended up with here. And then we took down the LTU LR antenna. That said, we kept both of those on the right because 60 gigahertz, it's a far enough link on this that it suffers rain fade. So if it's very heavy rain, that link will drop and then it will fall back down to the 5 gigahertz antenna to keep it alive. But it obviously suffers the same bandwidth problems as before. And you can kind of see the M train in a red line that's going up and down there. And there's a weird pattern that happens in that part of Bushwick where the Myrtle M train that passes overhead, it blocks people's rooftops from being able to point antennas across the way where we're going. So when the train goes by, it knocks everyone's internet out every single time. And so that you can see kind of in the pictures there's a lot of crisscrossing and zigzagging that goes back and forth, but it never really goes down below that line unless you're kind of further away and you can kind of get a little bit more sight angle above. So we've got some interesting problems we're trying to solve there. And Wilson was a member. We asked them, can we promote you and give you really nice equipment, put it on your rooftop, and it will help all your neighbors? And they graciously said yes and dealt with us going on their rooftop 4, 5, 6 times, trying different things out. And now they will be able to have 750 megabit speeds as a benefit from that. So it's nice to share with your neighbors. This has got some of the data from that, maybe a little hard in the audience here to see, but real speed tests. This is coming from our wonderful support bot in Slack. We were getting 4 megabits TCP download and 5 upload. That was from the antenna in the top right there, which is our normal antenna. Very congested, not what we normally get from that. Then when we moved to the LTU LR, we got about 40 megabits download, 70 upload. Significantly better, but not good enough that we really wanted to carry the whole hub on it. And then at the bottom, you can see the 60 gigahertz, and it's suffering the routing capacity issues. You can see the CPU usage is 100% on all of the bandwidth tests there, but it's only getting about 200 megabits, 220 download, 200 upload. So that's where that WAP or that SXT as the router would be able to unlock that, move that up to 600 or 700. And you can see on the right side, the antenna speeds that were reported, which are false. And it says 22 megabits download when you really got 4. It says 61 when you really were getting 5, and then 47 when you were getting 40, and 135 when you were getting 70. So don't trust the antenna speeds, trust the real bandwidth from it. So big performance increase as we worked through different technologies and found a good home. So the rooftop, another medium-sized hub. So this is my rooftop. Thames, a lot of equipment. I had a work thing. I bought some stuff. They didn't want it. I put it on my rooftop. That's kind of started this big pole that's here on the left. The idea behind it was a 5 gigahertz cross connect. So it's in the middle of a lot of these other hubs. So you can see Vernon, big hub, Saratoga, big hub, Thames, they're kind of in the middle of Soft Surplus House, Jefferson, Cypress, and Wilson. And so what I'm doing there is I'm pointing 5 gigahertz antennas at each one of them. So it's instead of having a long transmission that crosses all the way over the neighborhood, I can point to point and I can be a router in between all of them. So I'm the last ditch resort that if everything goes out, everything will route through me. And it's happened a few times before. There's also the benefit that I feed from everybody. So I have like 5-way redundant internet on my rooftop right now. And basically all of Brooklyn would have to go out for me to be able to lose that. It's also a really nice test bed. I can just crawl up on my rooftop and put anything we want up there and point at Vernon, which is a very fast and mature large hub. So it's easy to be able to test out new technologies. And you can see there's also this pointy long antenna that's called LoRa, and that's a low speed, not really Wi-Fi. This is for like measuring little raccoons and cats where they are, or flood sensors, or very small blippy things that run off batteries for 2 years. And so we're doing a partnership with NYU, Tandon, to be able to help them out with some flood watch sensors. So there's an antenna that's on top of Vernon, and it wasn't working so well because Vernon's so high. It's like a 40-story tall building. So we put it on the top of my place, and it unlocked that whole Bushwick area to be able to get their sensors to work. So it's a really nice test bed, and it's the last ditch effort connectivity spot. Going back over to those LTU-LRs, rain fade in the neighborhood. So Vernon, everyone around that part of Brooklyn uses it. And when it goes down, a lot of things go down. So when the 24 gigahertz and 60 gigahertz antennas, when it's really raining hard and those go out, Vernon would just shut off for a little while. And so part of the benefit of the LTU-LR testing we did, we found that 100 megahertz point to point, of pointing just one LTU-LR to another, we point that at an edge node that has a VPN that goes back into our data center, and it actually carries the bandwidth of all of Vernon for it. And so the rain that happened a couple of days ago, these are real plots showing the bandwidth jumping off of the antennas that normally are used, and that the LTU-LR was carrying that. So that's cool. We now have not solved the rain fade issue, but we've definitely band-aided and patched the rain fade issue for it. So this is proven functionality. It keeps the hub online. It's very happy. And you can see one part of the antenna there on the top, that's on top of Vernon. And then you can see the other part of it there. And this is on Soft Surplus X House, which is a creative space that's in East Williamsburg. And you can see a whole bunch of antennas that we have on there. Over to Saratoga, we also have that other antenna, and that carries Saratoga when that goes out. That's also in the 5 gigahertz area. So reliability too, beyond rain fade, frequency congestion. So that's a huge problem that we have in the 5 gigahertz area. I started charting out all the frequencies. So the FCC gives a certain amount out for people to play with. We are working within that with what constraints we have. And you can see horizontally, although that little bar chart or NAT chart, that there's a lot of things on the same horizontal plane with the red lines into each other. And those are interfering with each other, right? So the sector antennas that feed out on top of buildings and fan out, if you have one here and you have one on the other side of town facing back at it, they're on the same frequencies, they'll interact with each other, right? You'll suffer performance from it. So it's a balancing act of manually picking frequencies and adjusting them. We use these things called DFS channels that are where aviation radar operates inside of. And for us to use them, we have to drop off of those channels the moment that we sense that the radar is being used. But that means that all those channels fall in random channels, and it means they're not good. And so we have to manually massage them back after every DFS event. So we have this wonderful Google Docs Excel, and we go into it and we make sure that we're fixing it for now. This is a great thing for some other database projects, maybe improve. But you can see there's a lot of antennas and they're all pointed at each other. And this is every one of our hubs with sectors on them, all interacting with each other in a small area. So it's important to make sure that we're manually adjusting those, or else it's going to defeat the purpose of what we're trying to do here. So in community, Bushwick, there's a lot of community events going on right now. So BAM, Bushwick Automata, there's neighborhood installs with Mil Mundos, which is a bookstore and meeting place. We did a whole bunch of community installs. I'll get to that in a second here, but they're a good partnership that we've worked with in the past for getting nodes on top of people's places in Bushwick. Collective Focus is another place like that. They're a resource hub that's in the area. They have Node on the top of their rooftop. Recently, a building was built that obstructed their view to the mesh, and I last week went to the rooftop and fixed it for them. But they provide internet to people in the area, and they're another great place to tap so that people in the neighborhood that don't have internet can learn about mesh and can learn about how we can hook them up. Bushwick City Farm, you can see in the top left and then just below it, that is a place that has a lot of migrants that come and stop by and use our connections there. And we have a lot of statistics that show that's very heavily used. And Jefferson Migrant Shelter, one of our hubs, we pointed an AP down at the migrant shelter at the base of it. And we can see a lot of people that are inside of that migrant shelter are now getting public Wi-Fi from us and using it. So community help backs that we're doing in the Bushwick area, there's a lot of them. That BAM install, so shout out to Willard here, who was the one who set that kind of up. You can see him hiding in a hole and also working on his not Windows laptop in the cold. And then in the bottom left here, you can see another group of volunteers that's putting some things together. So this is one day. We had 12 volunteers from Mesh. We all showed up. We broke apart into 4 teams, and we installed 10 nodes inside that day. And so we still have 11 nodes left to complete inside of that. We got to about half of them. And so there's the next wave coming soon. But you can see on the map, the top left is what we did install. And the bottom right is what BAM or Bushwick Automata was working with us to try and get installed for it. So this is a great community engagement event. If you're looking for a way to volunteer and you're looking for a way to, see, how to set up these rooftop wireless setups, very different than what John was doing with the fiber inside of a large building. This is probably the next best event to go to, and hopefully we do it sometime soon. This was like about a month ago. So that's a good one. The community statistics from these places. So you can see the Jefferson Shelter, City Farm. City Farm has 3 access points, all very heavily used. You've got like 30 or so simultaneous users per access point. And then on the Jefferson Shelter, you've got about 15 or so. So a lot of bandwidth use, usually 50 gigabytes per day per access point is what we're going through there. And power improvements, we could probably help out City Farm. Their power seems to go offline every couple of days. Marketing nodes. So the idea to passively teach people about mesh and get them involved. Roberta's Pizza, Farm to People in the Maria Hernandez Park. Roberta's and Farm to People allowed for persistent advertisement to be placed inside of their place to give them free public open Wi-Fi networks in their open space. And so if you're looking at Roberta's Pizza, there's a huge outdoor space. They throw events there. People come see it. There's also a cell phone dead zone side of there. So everyone's internet goes out. They want to go on Instagram. They click on it. They click mesh. They see what mesh is, and then they learn about it, right? So there's an install at Roberta's. And then there's also another one that's at Farm to People. Farm to People is fresh produce boxes. It's a big warehouse for direct delivery from like upstate New York, lots of farms, bring it in and then deliver it out into the neighborhoods. But they also have a large outdoor space and a kitchen inside of it that they hold events at. So those both get heavy foot traffic and a lot of people connecting to their access points. And one of the BAM installs that we did, we were able to put access points on their rooftop as a community benefit and beam it into the middle of Maria Hernandez Park. And now Maria Hernandez Park, that center circle gets about 75 megabits download, 75 megabits upload for anyone that's sitting in the park. And so you can see quite a few people are utilizing that on a day-to-day basis for the metrics that we've got of just connected users for it. Not as much as any of those migrant shelters, but great for marketing, great for getting just the SSID tells people this is mesh, what's mesh, and then the idea to passively get people involved in the neighborhood. And with that, went through a lot of time. Any questions? Peter? Try again.
Test 1, 2, 3.
Gotcha.
So first of all, great job on researching these routers. I was following your research. Now I've got a couple of questions regarding this. How would you set this up if you want to, if you would like to, because I've seen a couple of use cases, and I was wondering, would you replace the Omni entirely with that small router, or would you add that to the Omni, like an additional device, and make this as a router and Omni as just a WDS?
Yep, that's a great question. Thank you. So I would just add it as a client off of it. So one of the benefits of that Omni pick is that it has 5 Ethernet ports off of it. A lot of times they're not all being used. One brings power in, the other 4 can give power out. So you could just attach this outdoor next to it as a client and it can share power. It uses a maximum of 10 watts, probably won't use all of that unless it's heavily routing. It also has 2.4 and 5 gigahertz antennas. So if you disable those, it could even drop it more. So what I would do is I would keep the Omni so that it's got 6 dB higher antennas on it. So it would radiate and WDS mesh better. So I wouldn't want to reduce the capacity of that, but I would shut the routing off inside of it and make it effectively just a managed switch and use switch level routing on the Omni and then push all of the routing directly over to the access point of SXT. So I would add it as a client, but then you would edit what you had existing. And that way you can always fall back to the other side if you want to.
I've got one more question regarding this setup right here. You did some research on the hardware, and you're the expert here, so correct me if I'm wrong here. The only difference that I see is the amount of the cores. There is only 1 core on the Omni, and there are 4 cores on SXT and this new router that you found. Is that correct?
No, so there's a big difference. So I agree with you, yes. So it goes from 1 core to 4 cores, but beyond also going from 1 core to 4 cores, it goes from a MIPS to an ARM 32-bit architecture, and ARM is far more superior of a processor than a MIPS is. So I think part of the benefit is that it's multi-core, but also I think the big benefit is that it's ARM instead of MIPS.
And I'm not sure if you will be able to answer this question, but also regarding hardware. So there is another situation that we are using net power switches. I'm not sure what kind of hardware they're running, but they're running also router OS 6, they can route. Would that be a good alternative to route through those power switches, net power switches versus the Omni?
So I've looked at that too. I do like some of the net powers, specifically the Light 7R is what I was looking at, because you can feed multiple sources of power from multiple different apartments or buildings into it. And then it has one output, but the one output is constrained by the amount of current that comes out of it. And so that's not as beneficial at routing things like having multiple antennas daisy chained off of it. So I can see where you may add that over time if you have more and more clients in the building, but I wouldn't replace the Omni with the net power for it. But I did look at that inside of it, that I have those all sitting on a table in a row next to me.
Bet you did.
And I tried that all out.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a bit of a mystery to me why we have so much 5 gigahertz congestion in Brooklyn, but we don't have it in Manhattan. Does anyone have an idea for that?
I don't necessarily know. The worst pocket by far is in that Wilson area. And you can see that all those red dots in a row. You might think, is it just that many red dots in the same place are bad, but those are all on 5180, right? They're all on the WDS frequency. So those shouldn't matter against what we're doing for AirMax protocol. I really have no idea why it's that bad in Brooklyn in that spot specifically. We don't see that problem in many of the other areas on here, but definitely, so Vernon and Saratoga, we have lots of overlapping sectors where instead of having like 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, or 120, 120, 120, and covering just the 360, we double overlap many of them because we've realized that we have too many clients that are pointed at it, each one of the sectors. So they start to lower in performance. Then we add another sector, and those aren't perfectly isolated from each other. And it also could be that we're not the only equipment in town. There's other people on these buildings and in these areas. And so we're easily watching the frequencies that Mesh puts out and we're adjusting those, but we have no idea what any other wireless ISP or just people in their homes are using.
Yeah, SN1 has an incredible number of antennas on it. And so you would think it'd be worse in Manhattan.
You would think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 1 megabit was really bad. And we tried moving all the frequencies around to try and get it first, because that didn't mean changing anything in hardware, right? We didn't have to mechanically do anything. We could just adjust frequencies around the neighborhood. And that really didn't solve anything.
Just a quick back to the hardware for a second. So theoretically, if you're doing an install with an Omni and an SXT, would it just in general make sense to be using the SXT as the router and turning off router functionality in the Omni? Do you think?
So it would really mean the only time you're really going to need more routing is if you have an antenna that's capable of getting that much bandwidth.
Right. Okay.
And none of our 5 gigahertz antennas or the Omni through WDS itself come even close to that. So really it only comes to when you would add a 60 gigahertz antenna.
Okay, cool.
So this building John and I were at today, it's node number 552. That one it's got a Wave Nano to SN3. And I believe that Wave Nano reports that it should be able to do half a gigabit, like 600 megabit. Laptop testing maxes out at about 300. So I think we are being throttled by the Omni's routing.
Yep.
My understanding from what you've said is that the Omni can switch fast enough. It just can't route fast enough.
Yep.
So the solution to that, I'm wondering if the solution to that would be dropping one of these other routers. The other option I'm thinking is I don't know if the HAP or one of the indoor options is any better as well. And you could do this building, the Omni and the Wave antennas are on the roof. There's 2 antennas on the roof. There's one cable that runs down to the basement, and basically all the other switching for the building is in the basement. So it kind of makes sense that if I'm going to do a router on a stick, if I'm going to have a router somewhere else, I might as well just drop it in the basement where it's more easily accessible and whatnot, and I can just use an indoor one. So I don't know if you've looked at the HAP at all.
So I did. So one of the members, Josh, that's how he does his, and that's how he suggested that I look at it. I like the idea of it being outdoors because a mid-size hub, which is what I'm promoting this for when you add a 60 gigahertz antenna as an add-on to promote a hub up, that's something that we want to make that a fixture of the neighborhood. We don't want that just to be based on whoever the one member is that's supporting it in that building.
Yeah.
So I'd prefer all the equipment be outdoors, so it's easily serviceable by mesh. So if we need to change or touch something, also if there's multiple people feeding that install, so maybe you have like people on the first floor, third floor, fifth floor, whatever. That means that when one member moves out of the place or around, you don't have to physically go and move that from someone's apartment to someone else's apartment.
This is, so for this specific building, like this is like all the switches are in the basement.
Yeah, if you have common space, where is that?
Yeah. So it's like, do I throw a WAP up on the roof that could also be an antenna, but I'd probably just use, like I'm going to be doing SXT links to the buildings nearby.
Yeah.
So I might as well just use the Omni.
Or if you have SXT links, you might as well just use the SXT.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it's already there and you already have it.
Yeah.
But that said, it's a trade-off between vandalism, theft, things are on the rooftop, there's something to be touched.
Yeah. Okay.
So any of those options will work. We have people on the mesh that are doing this right now, and they have an indoor one because it's theirs and it's in their house, and they're a mesh like member that's volunteering on a consistent basis. So we know that it's highly accessible. In these instances, it would be really nice just to have them outside, because then it's not pertained to one person specifically.
Yeah. I think my main technical question is like, you could put that WAP somewhere else where it has one wire to the, like the Omni isn't going to be, that WAP can be a router on a stick, and it's not going to be limited by the switching capability of the Omni.
Yeah, the benefit of it is you could run WDS on the Omni on one side of a building, and you could have the WAP on the other side of the building. And then people could wirelessly connect through this one, and people could wirelessly, and you get two line of sights totally separate from it.
Okay. Cool. Anyone else?
How does the cost on the WAP compare to the Omni?
WAP's $65 and Omni is $150. SXT, I think, is like $50. So $50 or $60 for 3 times the routing. And that's really the cost benefit is when you're going to get a 60 gigahertz antenna, at least the ones that mid-size hubs are going to have that go long distances, like your GBLR or your AF60LRs, those are $300 or $400 antennas. So adding like a $30 or a $65 router to be able to unlock the speed of it just makes sense, right? Cool. All right. Well, thank you.